I'm Tammy Kolda, an applied mathematician, and this is Unlocking LaTeX Graphics. Today's episode is based on a question from a viewer about how to use PGFPLOTS to construct a legend for a plot with two y-axes. I'll start with creating just two separate plots. Then I'll show you how to combine those plots so that you have two axes on one plot. Next, I'll show you how to color code the y-axes so that it's clear which plot goes with which y-axis. You may not even need a legend at that point because we've done such a nice job of color coding everything, but I'll show you how to add one anyways that takes information from these two different y-axes. I'll conclude by changing one of the plots to a y-bar plot, which makes having a legend more complicated, and I'll show how to do all the little fixes to make everything work. This is one of a series of videos on this YouTube channel where I'm providing a detailed how-to guide on using TXE and PGFPLOTS. These videos are based on my book, Unlocking LaTeX Graphics, as well as some bonus materials. Here's our document preamble for today. The first group of packages are just conveniences. Here, parskip and full page are to make things look nice. The hyperref package is so that I can link the author name back to the YouTube channel. The important package is, of course, PGFPLOTS. I've also set a few options using PGFPLOTS. These are setting the compatibility to 1.17, scaling only the axis and setting the default size, and then setting default fonts for the title, axis labels, tick labels, and legend. I covered the fonts in PGFPLOTS in a prior episode, which I'll link in the show notes. These settings will be applied to all the plots in the document because we've declared PGFPLOTS set in the preamble. Before we talk about combining axes, I'm first going to create two separate plots of the data, and I'll eventually combine those into one plot. The data file I'll use contains 7 years of data about the Del Valle Reservoir in Livermore, California. Let me paste the code for the first picture here. So if you've watched my other videos, you know that the TXE picture is the drawing canvas. The axis creates the plotting environment. And I set the title and X label and Y label and the min and max values for the plot. When I compile this, we'll see that the plot shows up. And I'm plotting data from the file, and it uses the first column automatically, which is the year, and then I specify that the Y values are the max vol column, corresponding to the maximum volume of the reservoir each year in acre feet. I covered the basics of plotting in my previous Getting Started video with PGFPLOTS. Observe that the Y-axis has been automatically scaled by 10 to the 4th. We could disable the automatic scaling if we wanted using scaled y-ticks equals none. I also covered that in a prior video. The main problem we have here is that the years are not formatted as we would want. Because we're going to have to fix this a few times, let's define something special using PGFPLOTS set in the document preamble. So let me scroll back up here and go ahead and paste. I'm defining something called year format, which says that the PGF number format 1000 separator should be nothing. So by default, it's a comma. So I also explained this in a prior episode, and I'll link that in the show notes. Now I'll go back and use that in our axis options. So I want the X tick label style to be the year format, so I'll put that right here. And now when I compile, it gets rid of those commas and the numbers on the X axis. So that's one plot complete. Our second plot is very much the same as the first plot. Let me go ahead and paste that here. The only difference is we're plotting a different column and we've given a different label to the y-axis and it has a different range. And then we're plotting a different column, which is the rainfall. We started this video by creating two separate plots because the way that you get two y-axes in the same plot is by combining two different axes in the same TXE picture. So let's start with our volume plot as we had it above. I'll go ahead and compile that. The only difference is that I've added the positioning of the legend that we will eventually create as the outer northeast, but don't worry about that right now. The methodology that I'm going to use here to do two y-axes comes from a great Stack Exchange post, and I'll link that in the show notes. First, we can make it so that the y-axis is only on the left using the axis option, axis y line equals left. So let me paste that here. Now, when I compile that, it gets rid of the line on the right. Now, it may not be obvious that the left y-axis goes with the cyan plot, especially when we have multiple plots on our axes. So we can fix this by using a shortcut that I'll paste first right above. I'm defining a style named Y color that sets the color of the Y line, the Y ticks, the Y tick labels, and the Y axis label. Then I can add over here, Y color equals cyan, and we'll see what effect that has. It changes all those things to be cyan, and this matches the color of my plot. Finally, I can turn off the X lines by saying axis X line equals none. And so when I compile that, we see that those axis lines for the X direction have disappeared. But I'm going to go ahead and leave that on for now, and then we're going to turn it off later. Now, the first trick is that we're going to draw a second axis inside the same Tixie picture. So I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom here, and after this axis, but inside the same Tixie picture environment, I'm going to paste the second set of axes with the rainfall. Let's compile that. And now I want you to observe that even though I'm plotting the X lines twice, the ticks and the axes align perfectly. This works because Xmin and Xmax have default to the same values. You do have to be careful about that. If that does not happen, then you need to specify Xmin and Xmix manually. That's actually why I wanted to keep the X lines on, just to be sure that everything aligned. We'll go back and turn them off at the end. But first, we notice that the y-axis for this orange plot, which is aligned right on top, is still on the left, and we need to fix this by putting that axis line on the right. So we'll type axis y line star equals right to move that to the right-hand side. When we compile that, that's now over on the right. Second, we need to make it orange using that style we've already set up. So I'll type Y color equals orange and compile that, and we'll see what happens. All right, so now we have that our volume is on the left and in cyan, and our rainfall is on the right and in orange. The only thing left is that the Y label on the right is facing outwards. Let's twirl that around by adding a 180-degree rotation to the Y label style, as I show here. And now that's facing inward, just like the other one. This plot is pretty clear as it is, but let's go ahead and add a legend just for fun. In prior videos, I've specified legend entries using legend entries as an axis option. In this case, I'm going to use a different command. That is, add legend entry with the name of what I want in the legend, that is volume. So when I compile that, I get volume over in the legend. I also want to stress that this add legend entry command is not followed by a semicolon. It's a little bit different than the add plot command. Observe that the legend is a little far over to the left, and because we have this extra axis over here, it's almost overlapping it. So let's move out our legend with an option on the first axis. We'll put legend style equals X shift 10 millimeters. And so that's just going to shift the whole legend over by 10 millimeters. Now, how do we get the second legend entry in there? This is actually pretty interesting. First, we need to add a label to the rainfall plot below. So I'm going to go down here and add label rainfall. Next, we add a special incantation for the first axis. After adding this legend entry volume, I'm going to go ahead and paste this thing, add legend entry, PGFPLOTS ref style equals rainfall. That's referring to this label I've set up down here. And then I'm going to add legend entry rainfall. So what happens when we compile this? The first time we compile it, it doesn't always look like it's working because it just draws a plain black line. Let me do one last bit of playing. I'm going to turn the first axis into a Y-bar plot. First, I'll add Y-bar to the axis options. Let me just go ahead and add that here. And before I compile that, I'm just going to change this to cyan 50%, and then I'm going to fill it. And now when we compile it, the first plot is a Y-bar. But you can see that a few things got messed up. First, the X ticks are different on the two axes. One has the ticks on the inside, the other has the ticks on the outside. That's because Y-bar plots always flip the ticks to be on the outside. So let's just go ahead and turn off the whole x-axis for the first plot, and then we won't have that double axes anymore. And second, I noticed that the legend is wrong for the line plot. So we can fix that with another special incantation when we go down to the second axis. And then in the add plot command itself, we have to tell it what kind of plot it is. So let me paste sharp plot line legend. Now that's the default for our plots. So we don't normally have to specify it, but when you are mixing bar plots and line plots in the same legend, then you need to tell it how to do it. So you have to actually tell the plot it's a line plot, the sharp plot, and then tell it what type of legend to use. And then again, you may have to compile twice for it to work. It seems that on Overleaf, I only had to compile once. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks again to the watcher who asked about legends for plots with two y-axes. Personally, I don't like two plots in one. I think it's much better to use group plots with the related plots beside each other. I'll talk about group plots in a future episode. There's a link to the Overleaf document we created today in the show notes. If you like this video, please click like or subscribe. You can also buy my book, Unlocking LaTeX Graphics, at your favorite book retailer. Thanks again for watching.